All right. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, because I've been getting a lot of people talk about this lately, is managing different communication channels. Because, the advantage now versus 10 years ago is there's so much more technology and there's tools to connect. There's, Slack and Microsoft Teams and all sorts of different brands. Many other brands are available. WhatsApp and, all sorts of these communication channels. But for some people, it's really overwhelming to know what's appropriate for work. How should you be talking to people at what time and what forum? Are you seeing some of that? And how do you manage all these different technologies and communication channels to be kind of efficient communication?
Yeah, for me, technology is a love-hate relationship. If it works to make my life easier, I love it. Yeah. As soon as it's not working, I get totally frustrated.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of different communication tools that are out there. What I find is for people to find what works for their situation and use it well. So you mentioned, the overwhelming overload. Whenever we look at communication, and by the way, communication was one of the things that remote workers, 100% of them say, excellence in communication. It's just non-negotiable. Yeah. You have to know how to communicate, whether it's written, verbal, choosing the channels, everything that's related to it. So it's something that you can't just push aside and say, yeah, well, whatever, we'll make it happen. It takes a lot of intentional thought. The overwhelmness of it all is very real. So you consider you're on a virtual call. So you've got a video going on, you've got a chat line going on, you've got potential documents are being put up on the screen, and you need to be, if you're leading the meeting, your eyes are looking at all of these different things and trying to make sure everything's working. If you're a participant in the meeting, you're supposed to be paying attention, and somebody starts talking about a party they were at last night. Well, what's that got to do with the meeting? So all of those different things, if you were in an actual room, those things aren't as confusing or as conflicting. Nobody's going to start having a conversation about a party they were just at.
Yeah.
But they forget that everybody's actually seeing that channel. So deciding as a team or as an organization, depending what the situation is, to have a communication policy. So what do we need to communicate? Who needs to be part of that communication? What is the proper channel for that communication? Like, how quickly do I need an answer? If I need an answer right away, then you're likely to use something like Slack. So it's, it's basically like turning around to the person in the desk next to you and asking them a question. Well, virtually, you're doing that through something like Slack. All the way through, when is the time to actually pick up the phone and have a conversation? What escalates to what? So for each industry, each organization, that's going to look a little bit different. But you need to have those intentional conversations. When you're doing virtual conferences, do they need is it just a conversation? Or do you need something that's going to be more robust, that lets you marry other platforms together? So for example, if you're using Zoom, like we're using right now, you can marry in Mural, and then Mural makes your meetings even more robust. And so marrying platforms together. So thinking through, what do we need to accomplish? What is the intent of our communication? And what are the tools to make it work? Rather than, here's a really cool tool, let's use it and figure out how it works. It's so backwards. Tools, technology has to be there to enhance our communication and work for what it is that we need it to do.
Yeah, and I think it's surprisingly rare, actually, for those kind of really clear communication plans to be in place. Like often it's fairly vague, or people kind of hope that the culture is just automatically going to translate into an online environment, when often it doesn't. It's really something that you have to actively manage and shape, and HR and leadership should be really involved in it, I think. Right? To be showing this is how you use these channels. This is what these channels are for. These are kind of the times, the appropriate kind of context and dialogue to use them for, and be continually managing it, right? Because you don't want to just shove a platform online and say, okay, see what you do with this, or there you go. You can connect with each other here, because people will use it for all sorts of purposes. Some people will figure it out and use it quite well. Some people will use it for less admirable purposes, or some people just won't know what to do with it, right?
And it's interesting because like today, when so many people they're instantly working remote, organizations haven't had a chance to get a communication policy in place because they never imagined that they would be doing this. But even organizations and businesses that start up and they may be remote first immediately, or they're doing hybrid. Many of these companies, these organizations aren't thinking through those communication policies. So to be putting those in place first is the best way, rather than, oh dear, now we have a problem, let's put a policy in place. Still, if you don't have one in place, you still do go ahead and do one. But having those conversations and making decisions before, it's really important.
Yeah, and I think some managers are worried about being a bit too heavy-handed, or they think autonomy is great, right? Which it is. But you also have to make sure that if people are going to be successful, they need some guidelines, some support, some advice about how to use things effectively. Otherwise, they just won't know. And people, I think, appreciate having those guidelines with the knowledge that they're flexible. You know, we can change them. We can change the platforms. If this doesn't work, we can try something else. But yeah, clarity, I think, and focus, especially in ambiguous times, are very helpful.
Oh, yeah. And when you're dealing with different time zones, it's really crucial. So is there an appropriate time when we're all online that we know we can communicate? Is there an overlap? So some organizations will only hire people that are in their time zone, or with a variance of 3 hours, so that you know that they've got a really good chunk of time. So the culture of the organization really speaks to that. Other organizations, they know they will be dealing with people globally. And so how do you deal with that? How do you respect that? And, you know, for a leader, sends an email at 3 o'clock in the morning, and the timestamp is on the email. What message are they communicating to their people? Oh, they must be expecting me to be answering and looking at emails at 3 o'clock in the morning. So all of those little things, it's like messages, the nonverbal messages, the messages that are communicated by the way we communicate, and by how we model how we communicate. We need to pay attention to all of that.
I know, yeah. And I'm one of the worst people for that, but I always try and be fairly self-aware of that, because I will send emails on like a Saturday afternoon or sometimes late at night, but I always try and either sometimes schedule it for later. So sometimes if I'm, if I feel like working and there's stuff I want to be doing on a Sunday, schedule it to send on Monday morning. Or if it's someone that I know or don't know that well, to say, I'm sending emails right now, I don't expect a response, just get to it when you get to it. If it's someone who I don't know their working style or working schedule. And then there's some people who I've been working with for ages who I know I can just send an email whenever, and they'll respond when they can, and they know that's where it's coming from. So I think that kind of clarity and communication between people is so important too, and just to be honest about how you're working, when you're working, what your situation is.
Yeah. And to know each other well enough to know, oh, okay, Ian's working. He really likes to work late at night. Yeah. That's his work style. And what we're doing doesn't have to be synchronous. It can be asynchronous. Mm-hmm. And so to know other people's, what's their sweet spot for when they work. And just because that's their sweet spot doesn't mean that it's my sweet spot. Now, there's definitely going to be those times, that we mentioned when everybody has to be available. But outside of that, if I know that, okay, but my boss likes to work at these ridiculous hours, great, he or she can go for it. It doesn't mean that they expect me to do that. And the freedom and just voicing that for people to say, don't respond. It's just, this is when my house is quiet. This is when my kids are in bed. This is when I can get work done. And that's good. Yeah. When I would be concerned is if those emails are going out at 3 o'clock in the morning and emails going up at 6 o'clock in the morning, then I would start being worried about, okay, is there some kind of issue here with balance in life? And so there's a lot of things that how and when we communicate can give us a little heads up about, is there possibly an issue here?
That's actually a really interesting point, because there's a lot of stuff we miss about nonverbal communication digitally, but you're right, there's a lot of other information that we do actually get in that digital environment.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So you take the whole package. It's just not what you see whenever you're talking to somebody in a video conference. It's the nuances in how they're writing something. Have they all of a sudden become short and curt in the emails that they're sending? Is there sarcasm that's coming in? So all of those different nuances, we need to be paying attention and asking, what's going on here, and what do I need to act on, and is there a conversation I need to have?
Yeah, definitely.